Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava, Daf 2b, page 2b. And we're talking about the primary categories of ritual impurity that started at the bottom of 2a, which is the Mishnah in Kalim 1:1. The primary categories of ritual impurity are as follows: any of the 8 species of the creeping animal enumerated in the Torah, Leviticus 11:29-30, and semen, now top of Daf 2b, and one who is impure with impurity imparted by a human corpse, a person, a vessel, or food that is rendered impure through contact with an item classified as a primary category of ritual impurity is characterized as a subcategory. In that domain, their categories are dissimilar to them, as any person or item classified as a primary category of ritual impurity impurifies a person and impurifies any vessels with which it comes into contact, while a person or item classified as a subcategory or ritual impurity impurifies food or drink, but does not impurify a person or vessels. After determining that there are instances where the legal status of subcategories is like that of primary categories, examples Shabbat, and there are instances where the legal status of subcategories is dissimilar to that of primary categories, for example, ritual impurity. The Gemara asks here, with regard to the laws of damages, what is the relationship between the primary categories and their subcategories? Rav Papa said, there are among the primary categories of damage some whose subcategories are similar to them, and there are among them some whose subcategories are dissimilar to them. Seeking to clarify Rav Papa's statement, the Gemara cites a brisa that delineates the primary categories of damage. The sages taught in a brisa 3 primary categories of damage were stated in the Torah with regard to an ox. An ox causes damage in 3 ways and is classified as a distinct primary category of damage represented by a part of the body of the ox. There is the category of goring, keren, literally horn. This is referring to an ox goring a person or an animal and causing damage. And there is the category of eating, shein, literally tooth. This is referring to one's ox causing damage by consuming another person's produce. And there is the category of trampling, regel, literally foot. This is referring to an ox trampling another person's belongings and causing damage. These are classified as primary categories because they are mentioned explicitly in the Torah. The Gemara elaborates, from where do we derive the primary category of goring? The source is, as the sages taught in a brisa, the verse states, if an ox gores a man or a woman, Exodus 21:28, and goring is performed only with a horn, as it is stated, and Zedekiah, son of Hananiah, Zedekiah ben Kenana. Zedekiah, son of Kenana, made himself horns of iron and said, so says the Lord, with these you shall gore the Arameans until they are consumed. 1 Kings 22:11. And the verse also states, his firstborn bull, majesty is his, and his horns are the horns of the wild ox. With them he shall gore the nations. Deuteronomy 33:17. The Gemara interrupts its citation of the brisa and asks, what is the purpose of citing the additional verse introduced with the term, and the verse also states? The Gemara answers, and if you would say that the first verse cited is not legitimate source because it's not a legitimate source as it is a verse from the prophets, and we do not derive Torah matters from the texts of the tradition, prophets and writings, come in here proof from the Torah, his firstborn, his bull, majesty is his, Bechor Sharo Hadar Lo. The Gemara rejects the possibility that the reason a second verse was cited is that the primary category of goring cannot be derived from a verse in the prophets. But is this halachic derivation? Is it a mere disclosure of the matter that goring is performed with a horn? A verse in the prophets can certainly serve as a source for that disclosure. Rather, the reason the Brisa cites a second verse is, lest you say, based on the first verse, that when the Merciful One distinguishes between liability for damage caused by an innocuous ox, a shortam, for which the owner is liable to pay half of the damages for the first 3 times that it gores, and liability for damage caused by a forewarned ox, shormuad, for which already gored 3 times, and whose owner was cautioned to prevent the ox from goring, for which he is liable to pay the full damages. That statement applies only to damage caused with a detached horn, like the horn of Zedekiah described in the verse. An example, if an animal held a detached horn in its mouth and caused damage with it, but for damage that an ox caused with a horn attached to its head, say that in all cases the legal status of the ox is that of a forewarned ox, and its owner is liable to pay for all the damage. Therefore, the Brisa says, come in here, a proof from another verse. His firstborn bull, majesty is his, and his horns are the horns of the wild ox. With them he shall gore the nations, where the reference is to a horn attached to the ox's head. Evidently, when an ox gores with its own horns, there is a distinction between an innocuous ox and a forewarned ox. The Gemara resumes its citation of the Brisa. What is a subcategory of goring? It includes any action that an ox performs with its body with the objective of inflicting damage: pushing, negifa, biting, crouching upon items with the objective of inflicting damage, and kicking. The Gemara asks, what is different about goring that it is characterized as a primary category of damage, as it is written explicitly in the verse, and if an ox gores a man or a woman, Exodus 21:28, accordingly negifa should also be characterized as primary category, as it is written, if one man's ox hurts, yigof, the other ox of another, Exodus 21:35. The Gemara answers, this negifa mentioned in the verse is actually a reference to goring, as it is taught in a brisa that the verse states, if one man's ox hurts the ox of another, or if it is known that the ox was a goring ox in time past, Exodus 21:35-36, the verse began its description of the case with the term negifa, and it concluded with the term goring, to say to you that in this context, the two terms describe the same action. This action is negifa, and this same action is goring. The Gemara asks, if the two terms are interchangeable, what is different with regard to an ox goring a person that it is written, if an ox gores a man or a woman, Exodus 21:28, and what is different with regard to an ox goring an animal that it is written, if one man's ox hurts the ox of another, Exodus 21:35. The Gemara explains with regard to a person who has the ingenuity to defend himself and is not easily injured, it is written, if an ox gores, a term indicating an attack of greater force. With regard to an animal which does not have the ingenuity to defend itself and is more easily injured, it is written, if an ox hurts, yigov, a term indicating an attack of lesser force. The term yigov is related to the term magifa, meaning plague. The Torah employs that term with regard to the goring of an animal to indicate that when an animal is gored, regardless of the force of the blow, it will likely result in its death. And the Torah's use of these terms teaches us a matter in passing. because the effort required for the ox to gore a person to death is greater than the effort required for the ox to gore an animal to death. The halacha is that an ox that is forewarned with regard to goring a person is also forewarned with regard to an animal. But an ox that is forewarned with regard to an animal is not forewarned with regard to a person. The Gemara questions the classification in the Brisa of biting, crouching, and kicking as subcategories of goring. Isn't biting a subcategory of eating, as the animal both eats and bites with its teeth? The Gemara answers no. In cases included in the primary category of eating, there is pleasure in the animal in the course of its causing damage. In this case of damage caused by biting, there is no intrinsic pleasure for the animal in the course of the damage that it causes. As when the ox bites forcefully, the exclusive objective of the action is to cause damage. The Gemara asks, aren't crouching upon items and kicking items in order to damage them each in a subcategory of trampling? As the animal crouches by bending its legs and kicks with its feet? The Gemara answers no. In cases included in the primary category of trampling, the damage is commonplace, as it is caused in the course of the animal's walking. In these cases of crouching and kicking, the damage is not commonplace, as animals do not typically kick or crouch upon utensils. The Gemara resumes its analysis of the statement of Rav Papa, but with regard to the statement of Rav Papa, that Rav Papa said, there are among them those whose subcategories are dissimilar to them. To which primary category was Rav Papa referring? If we say that his reference was to these subcategories of goring, what is different about goring that defines it as a unique primary category? What is different is that the objective of the ox's action is to cause damage, and the ox is your property, and responsibility for its safeguarding to prevent it from causing damage is incumbent upon you, its owner. In these subcategories of goring, in other words, pushing, negifa, biting, nshicha, crouching, revitza, kicking, beita, as well, the objective of the oxen's actions is to cause damage, and the oxen are your property, and responsibility to their safeguarding to prevent your oxen from causing damage is incumbent upon you. Rather, it is apparent that the status of the subcategory of goring is like that of the primary category of goring, and when Rav Papa says there are among them some whose subcategories are dissimilar to them, he was referring to eating and trampling. The Gemara asks, where are eating and trampling written in the Torah that led them to be classified as primary categories? The Gemara answers, the source is, as the sages taught in a Brisa, the verse states, if a man causes a field or a vineyard to be eaten, and he sends forth his animal, and it consumed in the field of another. Exodus 22:4. The two parts of the verse are referring to different categories, and he sends forth. This is a reference to the primary category of trampling, as sending forth results in the animal trampling another's produce and damaging it, and likewise it states, happy are you that sow beside all waters, that send forth the feet of the ox and the donkey. Isaiah 32:20. Clearly, the term sent forth is a reference to trampling by the feet of the animal. And it consumed, this is a reference to the primary category of eating, and likewise it states, and I will utterly sweep away the house of Jeroboam as one consumes with